Guys, Steve Mayeda here. This is the Austin Men's Development Group. We're live here in Austin. We're giving this presentation. And this is what we do. You know, on Thursday nights, if you're a part of our group, you can come to our meetups and so on. But most importantly, you can also attend our calls and go through our content and all this other great stuff. But what men's development is really about a discussion that is ongoing. Because I know for myself, every problem that I've had in my life, it was not good enough for me to just have information, for me to just have a cookie cutter course. Those things were all helpful and great guidance, but I needed a support system of people to be able to work with me and better myself. And so in this presentation, we're going over masculinity, lost and found. And why this is important is because it literally comes up on every point of trouble, every point of pain that a man is when he's, developing himself. All right? So we have here a couple bullet points that are key to this entire discussion that we're going to hammer on over and over again. Is number one, masculinity cannot be lost. It's not something that can be killed. It's not something that society can destroy. These things can influence it, no doubt. And we're going to talk about those. We're going to touch on them. But it can't be lost. It's within us. It's key. The other thing is there's three types of men that we see when we're evolving ourselves. There's the man who doesn't feel that he's good enough, that he's not man enough. He doesn't have what it takes. And a lot of us can relate with that. In fact, every single man who has gone through developing himself has been like, man, can I do this? Or I don't know if I can do this. Or maybe in our early 20s, or maybe some of you guys are in your early 20s, but you have that sort of doubt associated with it. The second type is the man who can't be a man because society has, through culture, religion, whatever it is, all the things outside of you influencing you are keeping you from getting in touch with that masculinity. And the third man that we're going to hammer on a lot, and this is the man who's found a way, and that's really what this group is about. It's about men finding their way, and men coming on that path, and men who have actually found a way and are comfortable with it. And the last thing is that I really want to hammer on is your pain lies to you. And this is such a huge point in all of the different development that goes on with what we teach. We're going to hear this theme over and over and over again. So let's get into this. So when we look at masculinity in our culture, what do we see? What do we see out there? And there's so many different people when we're in deficit, when we're not feeling like a man, when we're not feeling like somebody who is complete. We're not feeling like somebody that's confident, whether it has to do with our sex and relationships, whether it has to do with our career, whether it has to do with how we assert ourselves, how people respect us. When we aren't feeling that, when we don't see that sort of masculinity, then, man, we feel that we're in deficit of it. We're starved for it. And what is it that we're looking for? When we're looking for those things, what we do is we become obsessed with the problem. And this happens over and over again whenever we have a problem. It's healthy, right? When we are in pain, we want to analyze why we're in pain. When we're not getting the job we want, we're going to look over that, right? When we're not getting the respect we want, we're not getting the relationships we want, when we're not having the type of sex life we have, when our bodies aren't working the way we want, we're going to analyze what that problem is, and we're going to look, man, how do I fix this? Why is this happening? But see, it gets to a point where it becomes unhealthy, because when we're not living in the solution and we obsess about the problem, we move into looking at these problems with masculinity, which are very real. Nobody's denying this, right? So men, a lot of times we get overworked. When it comes to custody, when it comes to divorce court and alimony, a lot of times we don't get the best deal. In fact, there's tons of examples in our group where that has happened. All right? We have things like higher suicide rates, early deaths, higher risk jobs, all these sorts of things. When we see this, we see and we focus on this problem, what do we see? What do we see? We see that society, we see that culture is favoring things like women over men. We start seeing like, man, the government, the influence of the media, the fourth branch of the government is actually making it so that men have less of a chance. We start seeing things like feminism, something which was like, hey, we want to have our rights. Women saying that is an attack against men. It's taking something away from us. And when we get to these archetypes of masculinity, because I said, there's those three kinds of guys, when those guys who come in and they're saying like, man, I'm not man enough. And they walk into this situation seeing this problem, right? And analyzing it, why they're not feeling good enough. They start to feel more isolated. They start to get more depressed. They start to feel like they don't have a chance. Why even try? I can't tell you how many emails I get of going like, man, it would be cool to do your course, but I just can't take being rejected again. You hear this all the time. Man, it would be great if I got this date. It'd be great if I had sex with this woman, but every time I have sex with women, it just ends up not working out. And guys out there listening to this going like, man, if I could just get laid, I wish I could be that guy. Or it's like, man, if I could just win more, if I could just accomplish more, then finally I would feel complete. And we're still in this deficit of masculinity. And if those guys don't get some clarity, oftentimes they turn into these guys. These guys who say that society has taken away from them and made it impossible for them to be a man. So there's something about our culture, there's something about how our whole world works that makes it not possible for us to feel good about men and our bodies, our minds, our spirit, our purpose, our sex, that because of that, we can't do it. All right? We're done. And this is where, man, it's really interesting because when we hear about the war on men stuff, we start to hear things that is like what all these guys say they hate, which is extreme feminism, because it's like, man, there's a systematic assault on men. Meaning, usually, the court systems, the general consensus of, politics and so on is attacking men. Sounds pretty extreme. So it's funny because so much of this, when it really gets to like, man, society is screwing us. It's like the exact thing that these guys hate. And then there's these men who I say have found a way, or men on the journey to finding a way. Guys who have a little bit of faith that things can change. And what's interesting is when we get to those guys that are like, man, people in society and all these things outside of myself are keeping me from being what I want to be. They're always like, well, I've tried to find a way. I believed in that, but you know what? I read the science and now I've realized that this is just not true. But see, the thing is that these men who are in the same exact culture that we're all in, right? The culture where there could be a war on men, the culture where, we die earlier, we have more stress at jobs, the culture where we get screwed in court systems. Men who have all had these things, they found a way to still be confident, still have clarity, still feel good about themselves, and still feel fulfilled about their masculinity, so much to the point where they're not worrying about it, right? And where they're finding this success, it's across the board. And let me rephrase that. It's not always across the board where their families are in order, their bodies are in order, their minds are in order. They've found excellence in one or two of those things. And so what's interesting about this is we're not listening to those guys enough. And really what the crux of these groups are all about is finding men who have found that way, who have found peace with themselves, who have found confidence in listening to that. Because when we listen to that, we can find how to be social, be sexual. We can find how to get in shape. We can find how to, focus on our careers, focus on our inner selves and feel good about it, right? Here's the thing. The challenge of every single man in modern history has always been the same thing. It's been, how can I be the best with what I got? How can I take what is in front of me now and build something great? It's always been that challenge. It's always been there. And it's one of the distinguishing aspects of masculinity, and not to say that femininity doesn't have this, because it has in so many ways. We were on the call last night, and one of the guys was actually saying, he's like, man, masculinity is about building things. It's about creation. It's about drive. And I was just going over the checklist of all the things he was saying, and I was thinking, man, there's a counterpoint to femininity about all that too. But it's just said in such a different way. It's said in a way that's related to by women, and we have a way that it's related to by men. But it's so important to get that, that there is always a way that can be found. We're going to talk about this, but we're not in a place where our freedoms are that restricted. It's not denying that there's not problems that are out there that we need to work on. But I want to get into this. Like, how can masculinity be found in this world? Like if we're doubting, like, man, I've tried. I've given it my all. I'm the guy that doubts myself. I'm the guy that doesn't think it's possible. Or I'm the guy that is like, man, fuck that. I got screwed in the court system. I can't get the job I want. I'm discriminated against because of whatever, affirmative action, or a woman got a job, or whatever the hell the thing is, right? How can this be possible? Well, the reason why it's possible is because masculinity cannot be killed. What gives you your sex, what gives you your power, what gives you your uniqueness in being a man can't be taken away. And the moment that we say it can be taken away by whatever it is, whether that's feminism, a war on men, society, people, culture, that's the moment that we lose the force of nature within us, and we start to give it away to something that's abstract, that can't be solved, like society, like other people. And don't get me wrong, we can influence all those things, but when we make it about something like that, man, that's a never-ending battle. It's a never-ending war. See, no matter how much that we're changed by the outside world around us, the interesting thing about those guys who found a way, who found that confidence within themselves, is that it's taken upon themselves. The responsibility's them. Man, every single man I know, every single hero I know, and we're going to get into that too, they've had a lot of bad days, probably more bad days than good days. So look, guys, we talked about this as a free world. We have so many opportunities in our world, right? And as you guys know my story, man, I've been like fucked by the court systems. I was talking with another member, I think it was 2 days ago, about his divorce situation, how he just got screwed. Worse than me, because he's paying it every month in the thousands of dollars, in the tens of thousands of dollars. It's crazy. And I'm sitting there talking to him, and he's like, man, it doesn't matter. He said, he's looking at me face to face, he's like, but you know, Steve, I'm cut from a different cloth. I have a different demand on myself. Like, fuck that, it's screwed, but man, I'm a businessman. I'm gonna build this in the way that I wanna build it. And I'm gonna keep moving forward. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, man, that's amazing. That's freaking amazing. See, we live in a free world. We can always access things that are the nature of man. And see, that's one of the critical points of this, is like, are we a man that's defined by society? Am I a man that's defined by you or you or you? Am I a man that's defined by how people interpret me and so on? Those are all influential big things, but ultimately the man that changes that, if there is a problem with my reputation, if there's a problem with how I come across, it's up to me. It's up to what is within me to change that. And I always have the freedom to change that. If I want to change my body, if I want to stop eating pizza in an eating contest fashion over the weekend, which is a true thing, it's up to me to make that decision and cultivate that. I get it that it's hard. I get it that there's all sorts of influences in there. I get it that my body's telling me I need these things, but it's up to me, and we always have that freedom. And that's one of the most important things that we got to understand. You know, and so why is it that we have all of these men feeling there's such a massive deficit? You know, why is it that we have these groups? You know, why is it that we have guys, you know, shooting people up, or bombers, or even today in Austin, I was stuck in this traffic because they thought there was another bomber. And the time when the Austin bomber was going around, he was a man who had lost his way, and that was one of his things that he talked about. I never met him, but you know, it's what I read in the news, so on. But in that, why are we having that? You know, and you know, I've given a lot of talks on this. I have a lot of theories about it, but they're theories, you know, and theories are meant to be implemented in the world and so on. But man, one of the things is that we have a dense culture. We have a lot of people, and the more we have a lot of people, and the more we're distant from each other, the more we walk by 100, 1,000 people a day without acknowledgement, we're going to feel lost. And so everybody's kind of searching for this thing. And it's the world that we're in, and society has so many great things, and culture has so many great things. But man, that causes a lot to our emotions and our sense of identity and all these important things. But that being said, our culture allows us ways to dig us out of it. It might be hard to find it, but they're there. You know, listen to the men who found that way. If you want to know more about that, check out my Myth of the Alpha Male speech. So, men in the modern world, this is important, guys. If you're a guy that's entering that road to change, what you got to know is that the world's going to be tough. And just like we said, there's ways that we can predict and tell you to watch out. It's going to be tough, man. If you get married, maybe you should do this. If you go through a breakup, you should do that. If you're getting into this line of work, start thinking about these things. There are things that are uniquely male that you should prepare for and be aware of. You shouldn't necessarily be terrified of them, but you should be aware of them, man. It's an honor to be a man. It's an honor to be you. But I can guarantee you there's also things in this world that are going to happen that are going to be fucked, that are going to be terrible, that you can't expect, that nobody can prepare for. And that is part of the essence of being alive. In the man's journey of overcoming those things, man, that's one of the most beautiful things that you can have in your life. And so let's get into this. People who share the message of scarcity versus people who share the message of abundance. Now, this is relevant to all of the self-help world, but very relevant to what we're talking about right here, is that a lot of us, we talk about abundance or having things or being alpha or having command, and this is going to get us what we want. Abundance is cultivated by really living life. It's not there like a phrase we say. And I always bring up this idea of having a refrigerator. You have a refrigerator that's empty, we're always worrying about food. We're in a mindset of scarcity. We have anxiety, we have panic, we have things keeping us in the way of being able to be ourselves and express. But then we get to this point, and you see this all the time with self-help, where we get a full refrigerator. Man, I feel lonely, so I'm going to get more women in my life. Man, I'm insecure about money, so I'm going to make a lot of money. Man, I don't like being disrespected, so I'm going to win at something that I can always win at. And in that, we're actually living a mindset of scarcity because we're serving abundance so that we don't have fear. We are constantly in this mode where we're having a full refrigerator because we're afraid to starve, rather than having a full belly or having a full refrigerator or setting up our life in a certain way where we have enough to stop worrying about those things, because that's what gets us into expression. And so when we have men who have had this mindset of abundance, who have this mindset of confidence of self, like there's nothing in this world that can happen to me. Yeah, I might cry, I might hurt, I might be in pain, I might question myself, I might doubt things, I might have all these situations where it's like, man, I don't know if I can make this, but I know I can make it out alive. I know I can still make it out with who I am. That is what we want. That's that abundance mindset that we have with it. People who are in scarcity, man, we see the same thing over and over again. We see the blame. We see the obsession with things outside of ourselves, the causes, the political movements, how we're going to change that, how that's affecting us, how that's the real reason for our pain rather than looking at us. And every single guy in this room has been hurt by something big time, and it was somebody else's fault. That's absolutely true. We all know that happens. So this brings us to the next thing, which is the hero. This is that thing that we hear over and over again. And I remember I first started hearing this when I was speaking at the different conventions and so on. And this guy came up to me. He was divorced. He was upset. He's in pain, right? He's confused, and he's hiring all these people, and he's looking at all these coaches. And it's so crazy because working those conventions, you get to know everybody, and you kind of get to know, like, man, like how off some of these people's lives are. It was just that I'd come back from those things, and I'd be pissed off for 2 weeks. It was always tough to bring me out of it. But one of the things that he would talk about is like, man, I want a hero, man. Steve, I want somebody to guide me. I need somebody to look up to because I'm broken, man. And I'm like, man, you don't need a hero. What the hell are you talking about? He's like, no, I need that guy because he looks good. And it's very easy to show these things. But when we don't think that masculinity, when we don't think that these great qualities within ourselves are ordinary or found in nature or found in us, found in everyday life, when we don't think that great men live down the street, I guarantee you in this neighborhood, we could walk around and find a man that you could respect in multiple ways. It may not be exactly what you're looking for, but great qualities of masculinity can be found everywhere you look. But when you don't find that, and when you look online, and when you interact with too many people that are angry and pissed off about it, we fantasize about masculinity. We start looking at that guy like, we were talking about this last night, but on the Bruce Willis movies, and he's like taking out a whole terrorist squad in an airport with 2 Glocks, or, we look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, man, when I was growing up, I was like, Jesus, man, I want to be able to smell somebody and know that he's around the corner, like he did in Commando and all these things. We look at like different fantasies of how we're supposed to be as men rather than seeing it in the organic life. And it's terrible because we build a false story about what a man is. And it's very plain, it's very beautiful, and it should be honored, and it's great. And here I want to get into pain, because we talk about this as men. I mean, this is one of the greatest things. I always tell you guys that pain is one of my greatest teachers, and I always welcome it when it comes. And man, I bitch and I cry. You guys have seen me, who are in this group, who've been in it for a while, have seen me go through some fucked up shit. And every time it happens, I welcome it in the most crying, confused sort of way. But the reason why is because pain will show me where my problem is, right? Pain will show me exactly where it is. But with me, I've been around these groups so much, I'm focused on where that solution is, and it's around a group like this. Because where pain is a liar to you, and it lies to so many men, is that it tells you that half-truth, but man, it sinks those nails in the coffin with the lie, and the half-truth is this, is that it's going to tell you where that problem is. It's going to tell you that there is a problem. And that's very valuable, but it will never tell you the right solution. And how many times have you done this? When you're in pain and you're like, man, I need to make more money. Where's the entrepreneurship course? Or where's this, course on how I can make money online, or how I can date better, how I can have better sex. Man, I can't have an erection with a woman, and I can't fulfill people sexually, or my marriage fell apart, or whatever it is. We come at these points of pain as men, and it goes, man, we have a problem. Here's the problem. Let's pick the opposite of that problem. And this is where we get into that abundance scarcity thing. We have the full refrigerator, which is full of money, women, or things which are supposed to be success, but we haven't built up the success within us. And that's super important. There's nothing wrong with having an abundance of sex, an abundance of wealth, an abundance of whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with wins, but when we're only looking for that and neglecting what that pain is really, really, really exposing within us, man, we're losing a huge amount of wisdom. It's one of those TSL sayings that we say all the time: pain shows you where the problem is, but it never shows you the solution. And so look, guys, masculinity is meant to be hard. Anything that is a gift to you, anything that's worthwhile, something that has to be lived, you have to work it every day. These things like men's groups, these things like these presentations online, we didn't need these in previous generations. Part of the reason for that is because we talked. We had those hard times to go through. And man, this is something that we were talking about on the call last night, is sometimes the best that we got, and man, this is an awesome best, but the best that we got is that I'm in pain, I hurt. And our buddy comes down and sits next to us and says, man, you just got to ride it out, but I'll ride it out with you. And that is a beautiful moment. I am in the business of working with men, and the best answer I got a lot of times is, man, I don't got a quick fix for you. You got to grow out of this. You're going to have to sit with it. It might take months. It might take a year. It might take a long, long time, but it's going to take time for you to stop worrying about it, panicking about it, and be able to grow out of it. And yeah, there's some great pieces of advice that we can give along the way that are really going to help you leverage that. But man, so much about what we do as men, we just don't find in our modern day world these days. Yeah, there is a society that doesn't make it easy for anybody to find themselves in. There are specific problems with masculinity that suck. It's bullshit. I don't like walking into the courtroom and the judge just being like, nope, sorry. And man, just a girl crying. And I get robbed from fatherhood. I get robbed from money, all these different things. But guess what, man? I stopped bitching about those things and started going like, man, how can I get through this pain? How can I get through this hurt? How can I get to the best place I can be? How can I get to the best place I can be so when I am reintegrated with my kids, when my relationships do die down with all the drama, that I can be the best dad I can be? And by the best dad I can be, how can I start influencing certain things so that we don't run into these problems again? This is how we change or this is how I see it. This is how these things happen. I don't feel that me being angry and fighting online and bitching about all those things did much for me. So the solution, look guys, there's many solutions. There's a lot of solutions. There's a lot of poor ones. But The solution that we have here and the solution that works, and it's worked over and over again, is this. We have groups like this. We meet up a lot. We get to know each other. Our accountability isn't something like, hey, I'm going to do this week or else. It's like, hey, I know you. I know you. I have a bond with you. And because of that, I'm going to keep my word. Our solution is that we go through a personal inventory, so we find out who we are. If we plan on working on ourselves and we think that we can fix the internal work of us like we went through school, like we got our job, we're fooling ourselves. Man, we have emotions. We have a complex web of how we see ourselves. That stuff has to be worked through. And through that, we can start living those things well. Man, but through community, through self-inventory, through taking some pride in ourselves and then taking actions based on that, man, we make big leaps. And we were on the call multiple times this week where I was talking with some of the old school guys, and they're like, man, I know so many groups that are super organized, that have great curriculum, but they never stuck around. And there's a reason why TSL has been around and never missed. In 9 years, there's only 2 weeks where we missed calls. There's a reason why there's guys who've stuck around for that entire 9 years. There's a reason why people achieve the success they have that's more well-rounded. But this is that solution, man. There's got to be more men congregating, being real with themselves, and knowing what true accountability is. So that being said, there's one thing for the members is to be a member, learn to be a member. One of the things I learned to be a member was the more that I worked and interacted with the group, the better I understood the principles that shaped that group. So how do we be of service? How do we contribute? How do we be a part of the calls? How do we integrate in this culture? But here's the thing is when you work within that culture and when you're able to share experiences with guys, grow with them, and see yourself grow, because you never see it until you see a new guy come in and he goes, man, that was like me when I was getting divorced. When you start contributing in that culture, the culture will work, man. There's a lot that happens with what we do with MDX. There's a lot that happens with TSL. It's very consistent, but it's dependent upon men working within that. And as we grow, I just put this in because we were talking about it a lot in the last couple days, is that a strong man, when he hears a man that doubts himself, when he hears a man that's weak, it's one of the most foreign languages he can hear, because it's just alien. It's just like, what are you saying, man? But every single one of us, and let's not forget this, started out saying that same thing. We all didn't know at some point. And one of the other things, too, that we've been talking about a lot is that it's not just that we all didn't know at some point. If I start a new thing, I got to learn to wear that white belt, or I got to learn to humble myself. If I go into a different realm of life, I don't know. But see, a guy that's achieved some point of excellence in his life, he's got confidence in himself. He knows that he could make it through that. But man, super important. So, that all being said, I want to cover this really quick, and then we're going to go into the circle up portion of this. If we have enough time, because we want to not overstay our welcome. But a couple things that are super important about Austin Men's Development, or anything with the MD Excellence courses. You guys all know it, you're familiar with it, but I just want to hammer this in because for these meetups, I wanted to put it on paper and something that we live by. So for MD Excellence TSL, if you guys are on one of these courses where we're in these private boards, number one, privacy is huge. We're all here because privacy matters to us. We want to be able to share openly. Man, I want to talk about things, like I do talk about things when they're really problematic in my life, and not feel threatened that they're going to get out there in the world. Now, if something's shared, through gossip, outside of the meetups that we have, outside of the boards that we have, outside of the calls that we have, that's not good. But if it's shared maliciously, you're banned for life on anything that we do. And we've had to enforce that twice, and it really sucks, but that cannot happen. And there's hard line on that. Very little hard lines with me. But also encouragement or endorsement of illegal activities. This is in there just to protect the group itself. But one thing that I always say is that if you need to personally talk about something that's on your mind that you've done, something that's illegal, and I've done plenty of things that are illegal. This is one of those things where a lot of my life revolves around recovery and a lot of drug stuff. I've done a ton of illegal stuff. I had to get that off my chest to somebody. But I did that in a small group or private face-to-face with somebody that I trusted. If you need to do that, you can definitely do that. But the group itself does not support or endorse that. A lot of the things that come up with this have to do with things like sex or violence. What are the things that get men in trouble? Especially men that are established. It's always greed, sex, violence. For some reason we can't handle our anger. We can't handle our sexuality. We can't handle our drive. We can't handle, money and greed. We're not supporting any of those things. Mental illness, therapy, legal advice. We actually have some lawyers that are in the group. We have people that have been therapists that are in the group. The group, though, is not meant for this. It's meant therapeutically that we get stuff off our chest, that we talk, and that's very important. But it does not replace a diagnosis. It also does not replace going to a lawyer's office. It does not replace going to a psychiatrist's office, psychologist's office, or a therapist's office. So if you need to take care of that, take care of that outside of the group. Also, if somebody says something to you, don't take it personally, man. We're all here to care about each other. And for guys who really understand the group, they're going to keep that in check, right? Including myself. But if somebody's like, hey, man, you might be bipolar, you might have like a mild case of autism or whatever, we don't know, take that seriously. It's not an insult. It's also that we can communicate with you better. Disputes are going to happen all the time. They get resolved all the time too. And something that's super important that got brought up to me just before this whole meetup is that you never have to go. If you need to go, if it's something's too much and people rub you the wrong way, you never need to stay away. You can reach out to me, or if you have problems with me, you can reach out to one of the guys that are established in the group that you know. So we have these things called masterminds. I'll start publicizing who they are more, the ones who are more open to hearing, if there are disputes, you can go to them, or you can go to somebody that really cares about the group. I trust they'll handle it right. The other thing is, if there's two people that are arguing, on a call, you got to stop that. It's not serving the purpose. So we need to move to somebody stepping in, or one of those guys being wise enough just to say, hey, let's stop. Okay, switch the subject. Happens all the time, gets resolved, and guys generally laugh about it almost immediately afterwards. We're an open group. That's really important. I want to, maybe I should rephrase that. These groups are only for people who are members of Men's Development Excellence. We will have groups where everybody's invited, maybe once every 2 months, 6 weeks, once we get more established. But what I mean by an open group is you can share anything, as long as it's not attacking somebody, or it's not about doing an illegal activity or something like that where it's going to cause harm to others. But man, talk about it. And it's also something that's very important. I always talk about this, is when it comes to illegal activities, you can share about your desire towards those. I don't care. Just don't talk about you acting on them. But an open group means that we can talk about anything. It also means that if you have a certain idea about things, it doesn't set the tone for the group. So a lot of guys will say something like, well, that doesn't fit in the culture of this. Now, the culture of this is that we care about one another and that we want to achieve our own personal excellence. All right. The other thing too is that there's no ideology, there's no belief, there's no pain that you have, there's no dispute that you have with somebody else that should never take away the unity of this group. Unity is super important. And what I mean by unity is that we stay together, and we see that us staying together is one of the most important things. One of the things that I think is super, super, super important that you guys know is, like, let's say I'm gone, or let's say I'm out of town. It's important that even though my seat's not here and filled by me, it's still filled by a man who wants to feel better about himself, to live his best life, and cares about everybody else in the room living that life as well. So that, man, if we can establish that as a group, and we already have that on the calls, I'll be a very happy person. In any case, that's it for tonight. Let's wrap this up. Let's switch over. Thank you guys for watching. Let's switch over for you guys who are watching on the live stream. Check your emails, and we're going to switch over to the call, and let's get this bad boy going.